Look down. If you are watching this in a shirt, a t-shirt, a kurta, you are wearing cotton. 8 billion people wear this. Almost none of them know where it begins. This thread has a birthplace. It has a name. And that name is 7,000 years old. In 1973, archaeologists excavating a burial site in Mehrgarh, in what is now Pakistan, found something inside a copper bead. Wrapped around the bead, preserved by the metal itself. Cotton thread, dated to 5000 BCE, not cloth, not a garment. Thread, spun by human hands, 7,000 years ago, in the Indus Valley. This is the story of the fabric that built the modern world. Who invented it? Who mastered it? Who made the Roman Empire bleed gold for it? And what happened when a colonial power decided that was too much for one civilization to hold? There is a symbol on India's flag today. A wheel. Most people think they know what it means. By the end of this video, you will know exactly where it came from. And you will never look at it the same way again. 5,000 years ago, before Greece, before Rome, before the pyramids were finished, farmers in the Indus Valley were growing cotton. Not just growing it, spinning it, weaving it, trading it. We know this because archaeologists found actual pieces of woven cotton cloth at Mohenjo-Daro, cloth that survived 5,000 years in the ground, and across every site they dug, Harappa, Mohenjo-Daro, Lothal, they found thousands of small terracotta discs, spindle whorls, the tools used to spin raw cotton into thread, found near hearths, near cooking pots, in ordinary homes. This was not a craft for kings. Every family did this. Cotton was not a luxury here. It was life. Now here is how far ahead they were. When the ancient Greeks first encountered cotton, they had no word for it. Herodotus, one of history's most widely read writers, described it as wool that grows on trees. That confusion still exists. The German word for cotton, Baumwolle, literally means tree wool. In 326 BCE, Alexander the Great marched his army into northwestern India. His soldiers were wearing heavy wool. In Indian summer heat, they left wearing cotton, and they never went back. By the 1st century CE, 300 years later, the Roman Empire had a problem. Their citizens couldn't stop buying Indian cloth. It was lighter, softer, better. Nothing Rome made could compete. A Roman writer named Pliny, one of their most influential scholars, wrote that India was draining the empire of gold. Every single year, millions in silver leaving Rome, going to India, in exchange for cotton. Roman senators passed laws trying to stop their own citizens from buying Indian fabric. The laws didn't work, because once you felt Indian cotton, you don't go back. Now here is what most people miss. What made Indian cotton different was not just soil, not just climate. It was knowledge, built up across thousands of years, passed from parent to child, from master to apprentice, along the same rivers, in the same villages. In one corner of Bengal, along the banks of the Meghna River, grew a cotton plant called Futi Karpas. It grew only there, nowhere else on earth. And from its fibers, weavers made something the world had never seen before. Muslin. Not just a fabric, a standard the rest of the world could not match. Today, a good quality bedsheet has a thread count of 40 to 80. Dhaka muslin had a thread count of 800 to 1,200. 10 times finer than what most people sleep on today. A full 6-metre sari weighed less than 10 grams. Laid on wet grass, it disappeared. They called it woven air. One account describes a 230-yard length of cloth packed inside a coconut and presented as a gift to an emperor. To make it, weavers developed tools that existed nowhere else in human history. One tool was the jaw of the boli catfish, used to comb raw fibers before spinning. Not because it was all they had, because nothing else worked. In total, more than 50 specialized tools were needed to make Dhaka muslin. Every single one passed down by hand, over centuries. The loom itself, bamboo and rope, the weaver sitting with his feet in a pit below, stayed the same for 4,000 years. Not because they couldn't change it, because it was already perfect, and this was not rare. This was normal. By the early 1700s, India supplied 25% of all global textile trade. The most important goods moving across the planet were not weapons, not gold, cloth, Indian cloth, from Japan to the Americas, from Istanbul to London. The world wore what India made, and that level of skill created a problem. Not for India, for the rest of the world. To understand what Britain did, you have to understand one thing first. Britain did not destroy India's cotton industry because it was powerful. It did it because it was afraid. In the early 1700s, British cloth makers had a problem they could not solve. Indian cotton was better than anything Britain made, and Indian workers cost a fraction of what British workers did. Britain could not compete on quality, it could not compete on price, it could not compete at all, not in its own market, not anywhere. So it did what empires do when they cannot win fairly. It changed the rules of the game. The plan had 3 stages. Stage 1, shut out the finished cloth. In 1701, Britain passed the first Calico Act. Indian printed and dyed cloth, banned. In 1721, they went further. All Indian cotton cloth, banned. Not taxed, banned. Wearing Indian cotton on a British street was a criminal offence. Stage 2, take the raw material. Here is the part almost never taught. The ban was on finished cloth, not on raw cotton. Raw cotton from India could still enter Britain freely because British mills needed it. The spinning jenny, the water frame, the power loom, the machines of the Industrial Revolution were built to process cotton. On an industrial scale, no human system could match. In the early decades, much of that cotton came from India. In 1750, Britain imported 2.5 million pounds of raw cotton. By 1850, 100 years later, 588 million pounds, a 235-fold increase. Stage 3, sell the finished cloth back. Once Britain had the machines, it could produce cloth faster and cheaper than any human hand could manage. At a scale, no village could survive. And because India was now a colony, British cloth entering India faced as little as 5% duty. Indian cloth entering Britain faced tariffs of up to 85%. The market was not lost, it was locked. 3 numbers, 1 trap. Raw cotton, free to leave India. Finished Indian cloth, tariffs of up to 85% to enter Britain. British cloth into India, as little as 5%. There is one more detail most people miss. The very laws used to destroy Indian cloth were named after Indian cloth. Calico, the word in the Calico Acts, comes from Calicut, the port city on the Malabar coast, where Indian cotton had been traded for centuries. Chintz, the printed Indian fabric that filled European drawing rooms, comes from the Hindi word chint, meaning spotted cloth. Britain banned Indian fabric, built an empire replacing it, and named the laws after the place it took everything from. The word survived. The world just forgot where they came from. Now watch how the chain works, end to end. Because most histories show you one link at a time. This is all of them, together. Indian farmers grow cotton. The East India Company controls who they can sell it to, and the price they are paid. The price is set low, because the company sets it. The cotton ships to Lancashire. In Lancashire, machines spin it into thread and weave it into cloth. Those machines, the spinning jenny, the water frame, the power loom, were built on the same spinning principles the Indian Charkha had perfected for centuries. Britain scaled those principles with steam and machinery, then used that cloth to destroy the very industry those principles came from. The finished cloth ships back to India, sold in the same markets, in the same towns, along the same rivers, as a British product, in the same place it once came from, at a price Indian handloom weavers cannot match, because the machine is faster, because the tariff is rigged, because the law makes it impossible. Between 1800 and 1860, Indian textile exports collapsed, by some estimates as much as 98%. In the same period, British textile imports into India surged. Entire weaving towns declined. Dhaka, Murshidabad, Surat, 40 generations of skill, systematically dismantled, not stolen, not replicated, made unsustainable. But the system still needed one more thing from that land: dye. The Lancashire mills needed indigo to color all that cotton cloth. So the East India Company turned to Bengal and Bihar and forced farmers to grow it on their best land, the land that had grown food. That story deserves its own video, but the result is the same. And when the famines came in 1770, 10 million dead. In 1876, 5 million dead. In 1943, 3 million dead. The food was not there, because the land that grew food had been converted to grow cash crops for British industry, and the grain that remained was exported, while people starved. This is the full chain. Cotton to weavers, weavers to raw material to machines, machines back to India as finished cloth, land converted to dye crops, food gone. Famine arrives, not conquest by cannon, conquest by chain. 1917. A lawyer from Gujarat sits down at a wooden spinning wheel. He does not know how to spin. It takes him months to learn. His name is Mohandas Gandhi, and he understands something no political speech could say as clearly. The British did not conquer India with armies alone, and they conquered it with cloth, and the way to take India back was to spin. Without the spinning wheel, there is no Swaraj, no self-rule. Across India, people begin to spin. Rich, poor, rural, urban. Every hand, the same motion. Not as ritual, as economics. Every yard of khadi was a yard of British cloth not bought. Every rupee stayed in Indian hands. The spinning wheel went onto the flag of the Indian National Congress. A tool every household had used for centuries. A tool the British had spent 150 years trying to make irrelevant. On the flag. India was not just spinning thread. India was answering. 1947. India becomes independent. There is a debate about the flag. Gandhi's Congress flag had the Charkha, the spinning wheel, at its center. For the national flag, the Constituent Assembly made a different choice. They replaced the Charkha with the Ashoka Chakra, the wheel of Ashoka, the wheel of law, dharma, perpetual motion. Gandhi was not happy. He had fought for the Charkha, his symbol, his weapon, his answer, and it was gone from the flag. But here is what most people are never told. That wheel still traces a direct line. Because when Bangladesh decided, in 2014, to bring back Dhaka Muslin, to revive the extinct Futi Karpas plant, they had a problem. The plant had nearly disappeared from cultivation. The tools and knowledge required to process it were gone. So they went looking for DNA. They collected 39 species of cotton from across Bangladesh. They compared them with fragments of ancient muslin held in the Victoria and Albert Museum in London. The museum, built to preserve empire, held some of the only preserved samples of what that empire had helped destroy. It was a close genetic match. The plant was still alive, in a small town called Kapasia, north of Dhaka. They grew it. They trained weavers. And in 2022, for the first time in nearly 200 years, Dhaka Muslin was declared revived. From a woman spinning cotton thread at Mohenjo-daro 5,000 years ago, to the weavers of Dhaka, whose thread was too fine for the world that came after them, to the man who picked up a spinning wheel in 1917 and made it a weapon, to the scientists who found the DNA of a lost plant in a British museum and brought it back, to the blue circle on every Indian passport today. The British passed laws to make it unsustainable. They converted the land. They took the food. They rigged the tariffs. They collapsed the industry and made the plant, the tools, and the knowledge nearly disappear. And the wheel ended up on the flag. You are wearing cotton right now. The thread in your hands goes back 7,000 years. Does anyone get to erase that? If you learned something today that you were never taught, share this with someone who should have been. Subscribe for more history they didn't translate.